200. That is quite an impressive number of chapters. Congratulations, Fujimoto. You finally did it. Last week I yapped some nonsense for 16 minutes. I do not plan to do that today. While the conversation, perhaps interesting, today we're reeling it back and focusing on Asa and Denji. While I do have a lot of ideas with where the story could go, how we kind of tail end into the finale, one thing that is elusive is the length. I don't know how much longer we have. On the shorter end, I can see around a singular volume, so about 10 to 12 chapters. On a normal size, I could see 20 to 30 chapters. Anything after that, probably a little bit too long and drawn out. Obviously, I wouldn't be surprised if Chainsaw Man Part 2 ends this year. I'm nervous, but I'm also very excited. I'm curious to see how Fujimoto wraps this story up, how he brings Denji's journey to a conclusion, how he concludes Asa, Mitaka and Yoru, how, I guess the bigger expansive questions we have. What is Pochita? What is Nostradamus' prophecy? What were the original intention for the hybrids and their erasing of names? A ton of things that could be explored but also left unanswered. While I do want at least some of those things directed towards, I would be happy if the grand mystery and the unknown attached to them remains just that. Personally, I do not need an answer or an explanation for the origin of anything or everything. A mystery or something unanswered can stay as just that. Asa Mitaka. I like how she was handled in this chapter. Very simple and straight to the point, but honestly, it's felt like something we have needed, almost crucial to her character. It's a part of development that works as closure, something that brings her almost entirely full circle to the beginning of the story. It helps to aid and to be digestible for someone like Denji to even comprehend, and now perhaps you could steer them together in the direction towards the ending. What that would look like without this tiny bit of information would be relatively shaky. And I think periodically you might have seen that throughout Chainsaw Man Part 2. That when Asa is left to the unknown, when things aren't technically answered or played upon within some sort of timely manner, she gets a little bit out of control, a little bit all over the place. I don't think it's necessarily purposeful in design. I think overall the things Fujimoto has focused on instead of kind of dogpiling onto Asa Mitaka is a pretty difficult balancing act. He could have easily wrote this story with her as the main intention. She still very much is, but it is a shared experience. Obviously, we jump back towards Denji. We spend a lot of time with Fami, now known as Death. We build this massive branch of Nostradamus' prophecy and a huge mystery, and then jumping back to her, and Denji again, and then cycling. So what you get is a rotation of characters that give their moments of development. And because characters are obviously in certain positions, Asa is kind of at the lowest. She's the newest character, but she's also a main character. But other characters are getting pushed higher because at that specific moment, they needed more awareness and attention. Asa has been trickling through this story, sometimes even tripping over herself because of the dual development. On top of it, you have Yoru, the war devil, so you kind of unironically cannibalize each other. Fujimoto done a very smart thing, trying his best to merge their development paths together, and I like that. They share a lot of things in common. They come to understand each other. They come to be almost one individual. While it's never truly one-dimensional, they've merged so closely to each other now that you can push them forward pretty much at the exact same pace. This might sound oddly obtuse and complicated. I mention it this way because I'm worried. There is a concern that I have because I really like Asa's development and Yoru's development and how it's balanced with everybody else. While personally I don't think it has gone as far or has explored as many things as I wish it did, I still value the sincerity of it. It's sensitive, it's introspective. It feels almost suffocating in a way. When you isolate Asa to herself without the big grand climatic stuff going on, it can be a very sad and emotionally driven story. For a moment, just imagine a Asa Mitaka story with Yoru going through her everyday life. going to school, dealing with bullies, dealing with the emotional responsibilities, Yuko, the loss of family and friends. It becomes traumatizing, and treading over that water is difficult. In a lot of ways, she parallels Denji incredibly well with not only his childhood, his growth and responsibilities, and how he perceives the world now. The worry that comes in from this chapter and this development makes me think that perhaps she is losing herself, which might sound weird to say. She finally figured it out, dived internally and emotionally, and knows how to navigate all the painful mess that she has obviously been dealt. This is obviously a good thing. Not entirely. The way she wants to handle a lot of the emotional aspects of her issues and trauma is really, really bad. But I can't blame her directly for it because she doesn't really know another way to cope with it. And at the end of the day, whatever coping mechanism works for you is the one that's the most valid at the time. If another one comes along, or a different one, or one that can be changed or evolved or is healthier, of course, that option could be more valid. The worry is that her coping mechanism is escapism. She wants to kind of just forget about it, push past it, move forward, and enjoy the fun times, which on its own and for brief periods isn't necessarily bad, but for a very traumatizing experience, it can be jarring, incredibly life-altering, and emotionally taxing or draining. Not to give a morbid example, but imagine going through a very hard period in your life. A family member dies, for example, and the way that you cope with that is by forgetting it, moving past it, and just having the time of your life. There's a reason why grief and mourning and accepting loss is so pivotal to healing. What she's doing now is kind of just a band-aid for a bigger problem, but it is steps in a direction that could be right. The worry, again, here I am kind of circumnavigating, being obtuse, my bad. The worry I have is that I feel like the fun that she's trying to direct herself towards, the forget about it idea, is coming from Yoru specifically. There's a couple of moments throughout the story where Yoru and Asa mention that because they share the same brain, they share the same feelings and experiences, and they merge together. This has been evolving over the entirety of the story, and it is a very easy thing to forget about. We don't know the fundamentals of how that works, but what you could imagine, Asa does not have any fun. But the fun that Yoru is experiencing right now is collectively fueling back into her. So she is also feeling that enjoyment that she's having with Denji, but through the lenses of Yoru. The same way that Yoru feels love and affection towards Denji when that originally wasn't her own emotion. To simplify, Yoru has emotions and gives them to Asa, Asa has emotions and gives them to Yoru. They collectively share and they kind of even themselves out. Does that make sense? That is the worry I have, that the feelings of happiness or the feelings of escapism is coming from Yoru, which that band-aid that she's put on is now just tapered to the idea of disconnect. If Yoru ever disappears or if Yoru dies or whatever, horrible things will just come pouring back in to Asa. She will not have an escapism, she will not have any sort of happiness, and she could perhaps view Yoru as something that is actually needed. Currently, that is my perspective on it. It might sound overblown or very dramatic, but honestly, reflecting on the story and what Asa has been through and how she's handled herself alongside Yoru, it feels like it kind of clicks the most here now. Whether or not it's vital to the story or even necessary is up in the air, but I wouldn't be surprised if Fujimoto would like to tinker around with the idea just a little bit within the final moments to maximize the work he's already done for it. The second half of this chapter is pure bliss and enjoyment. You go from this melodramatic, very emotionally tense escapism scene with Asa and Denji and that conversation to Denji and War blowing stuff up and having an absolute blast. Like, oh, they look like they're having fun. It's kind of a sweet experience. Asa's also getting the fun that she's talking about indirectly. And then you realize that the people they're killing were innocent humans turned into chainsaw zombies, whatever. The world is in absolute shambles and death is about to descend upon them. It's the worst of worst situations with a small little circle of happiness in the middle just for them. Fujimoto does do this quite often, where happiness, quote unquote, is completely encapsulated by the vibrant nature of his characters running wild and being free within the chaotic nature of the world. Fire Punch is a beautiful example of it. That's the most misery-fueled, nihilistic world that you could imagine, but the people within it are so beautifully bright and personality-driven. You can't help but not love them. This is obviously short-lived. Fake Chainsaw Man is here, surprisingly deflecting Yoru's attack, which I didn't see coming, but I thought that was kind of cool. Denji going wild as he does, and a fight is about to commence, but it looks like it's going to be filled with information. At least I would hope. The funniest part about supplying information to Denji from a character that obviously looks like him, Fake Chainsaw Man, is that I don't know if Denji will even just ingest it. Fake Chainsaw Man might say some very vital things, important, crucial. The way Denji or Asa or Yoru just interpret it is entirely wrong, which would be funny if that messes with the overall plans that Death has. Are we about to get a 2v2 fight? Would be kind of cool. I will say it definitely feels like the calm before the storm, getting bits and pieces of important information to us as readers before we descend into whatever chaos Fujimoto is about to draw. Artistically, he was kind of cooking in here too, so I'm excited to see how he ramps that up for the finale of this story.